10 morning steps before you start your day can reprogram your life to stress-free days. You don't wake up tired because of sleep. You wake up tired because your mind starts running before your body even moves. The first 10 minutes after you open your eyes decide everything: your focus, your stress, your energy, your emotional tone for the next 16 hours. And yet, most people waste that sacred window by unconsciously rehearsing yesterday's chaos. The notifications, the rush, the self-criticism, all of it returns before the sun has even risen. What you call a normal morning is, in truth, the beginning of a neurological storm. Science reveals that in those first few minutes, your brain is in a unique state, a transition between theta and alpha waves. This is the same state children live in, the one where imagination shapes identity. It's also the most programmable phase of your consciousness. Every thought, every image, every piece of information you expose yourself to becomes the blueprint your mind will follow for the rest of the day. Your body listens to your first thought. Your nervous system obeys it. If that thought is fear or tension, the rest of your day becomes a reaction. If it's structure and calm, your day becomes creation. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain's chemistry follows your attention. The moment you wake up, cortisol begins to rise. It's supposed to. That surge is designed to mobilize energy, to get you moving. But when you mix that natural biological spike with mental noise, you transform a tool for alertness into fuel for anxiety. The brain learns to associate mornings with threat. That's why you can wake up with no external problem and still feel stress pulsing in your chest. It's not reality causing it. It's programming. What you do in the first moments after waking isn't routine. It's rehearsal. You're teaching your brain what kind of life to expect. Jordan Peterson often says that meaning begins with structure, and that chaos thrives in the absence of direction. Your mornings are either a laboratory of intention or a repetition of survival. The choice isn't about discipline, it's about design. You can't create a peaceful life while unconsciously rehearsing stress every dawn. Today's mornings are not neutral. The light from your phone replaces sunlight. Dopamine spikes replace silence, and distraction replaces direction. Your brain wakes up in a storm of digital noise and emotional residue, repeating the same chemical pattern that defines stress. But the same biology that keeps you trapped can be reprogrammed. The mind that learned to wake up in chaos can learn to wake up in clarity. It begins not with motivation, but with awareness, with a different approach to those first 10 minutes of consciousness. Because the truth is simple. You can't control every event that happens during your day, but you can control the state you bring into it. And if you change the first hour, you begin to change every hour that follows. The first moments after waking are not preparation for the day. They are the day. And those who master them, master their lives. The hidden battle in the first 10 minutes after you wake up. The real fight begins before you even open your eyes. It's the quiet moment when your brain, caught between dream and consciousness, decides whether to lead or be led. In that fragile space, your mind doesn't yet distinguish between imagination and reality. Whatever you focus on first becomes the foundation of your mental architecture for the day. If you reach for your phone, your brain learns to chase stimuli. If you pause and breathe, it learns to create calm. Neuroscience shows that this early period defines your neural rhythm. The release of dopamine and cortisol calibrates how your body perceives challenge versus opportunity. When you instantly react to messages or notifications, your nervous system interprets urgency as survival. It sets the baseline for anxiety. You're not starting the day. You're continuing the stress loop from yesterday. But if you start with awareness, by observing before reacting, you shift your body from defense to direction. René Descartes believed that consciousness was proof of existence. I think, therefore I am. But the modern human wakes into a flood of external input that prevents true thought from forming. Instead of awareness, there's reaction. Instead of thinking, there's noise. The challenge of the first 10 minutes isn't to do more. It's to remember that you exist before the world begins to pull at you. Those moments are your reset, the border between who you were yesterday and who you choose to be today. Andrew Huberman emphasizes that the brain's alertness system is designed to stabilize after waking, not to be overloaded. Natural light exposure helps synchronize your circadian rhythm, aligning your energy with biological daylight instead of digital demand. The problem is that most people never experience natural awakening. Artificial light and instant attention hijack the system, turning mornings into a chemical conflict between technology and biology. That conflict is the hidden battle, not between good and bad habits, but between awareness and automation. You have 10 minutes to decide which side you'll fight for. 10 minutes to choose silence over noise, creation over reaction, self-command over reactivity. These minutes are not small. They are sacred. The person who wins the first 10 minutes wins the day because they teach their mind to respond, not to run. Step 1. Interrupting the cortisol spike. The first biological event of every morning is chemical, not mental. Before you even think your first thought, your brain releases cortisol, the hormone that wakes your body, sharpens your senses, and prepares you for movement. This surge, known as the cortisol awakening response, is nature's alarm clock. It's meant to give you energy, not anxiety. But the modern mind has turned this biological advantage into an emotional disadvantage. By pairing that natural chemical rise with stress, screens, and instant information, you've taught your body that every morning is a threat. Andrew Huberman explains that cortisol's job is to signal alertness and focus, but when triggered alongside anxiety or negative thought loops, it trains your nervous system to expect danger the moment you wake. That's why your heart races before you've even had breakfast, why you check your phone and feel an immediate rush of unease. The brain doesn't know the difference between an incoming email and an incoming predator. It reacts the same way: fight, freeze, or flee. The first step towards stress-free days is breaking this cycle before it begins. The interruption doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. As soon as you wake, instead of reaching for the phone, reach for light and breath. Open your eyes and let natural light enter them. It tells your brain, you're safe. It's morning. The world is not on fire. That single act recalibrates the hypothalamus and begins to align your circadian rhythm. Next, take one deep, deliberate breath. Not because it's relaxing, but because it interrupts the pattern. The pause between sleep and action resets the body's expectation of stress. Jordan Peterson often speaks about the necessity of creating order before facing chaos. This biological ritual is exactly that. Order through awareness. When you control how you meet the morning, you reclaim the narrative your body writes for the day. The problem isn't cortisol, it's context. When the surge of energy is met with stillness, it becomes focus. When it's met with fear, it becomes anxiety. The difference lies in how you greet it. René Descartes sought truth through doubt, but doubt that leads to clarity, not paralysis. Each morning, your mind wakes with uncertainty, an unspoken question. Is today safe? You answer it not with words, but with action. A moment of calm, a breath of control, a signal to your body that not everything needs to be solved immediately. In doing so, you transform stress chemistry into clarity chemistry. Physiologically, this ritual is simple: breathe, light, posture. But beneath it lies a deeper transformation, a rewiring of association. Over time, your brain learns to link waking with safety, not chaos. It begins to anticipate peace instead of threat. That's how neuroplasticity works. What you repeat becomes who you are. Interrupting the cortisol spike is not about suppressing stress. It's about redirecting energy. When you reclaim that first surge of alertness, you take back authorship over the day. You teach your body that awareness can exist without anxiety, that alertness can coexist with calm. And from that state, everything that follows, thought, focus, emotion, becomes structured, steady, and intentional. You don't start the day reacting to life. You start leading it. Step 2. Reclaiming your first thought. Before the world enters your mind, there's a fragile space, a silent gap between sleep and awareness, where your consciousness is still malleable. It's in this space that your first thought appears, and that thought, whether intentional or accidental, is the foundation upon which your entire emotional day will be built. Most people never notice it. They wake up, and their mind instantly fills the silence with fragments of worry, unfinished tasks, or the echo of yesterday's noise. They believe those thoughts are random, but they're not. They're programs replaying themselves. Modern psychology and neuroscience agree that the first conscious thought after waking directs your brain's reticular activating system, the network that filters what you notice and ignore throughout the day. If your first thought is about problems, your brain spends the day scanning for more. If your first thought is direction, gratitude, or purpose, the same system works to confirm that reality. You experience what you expect. The mind doesn't create truth. It creates focus. René Descartes once said, "The greatest minds are capable of the greatest vices as well as of the greatest virtues." Your mind's power to define the day can liberate or imprison you. Every morning, you have the chance to reclaim authorship, to choose what your inner dialogue will sound like before it chooses you. This is where philosophy meets neuroscience, where the Stoic concept of discipline meets the modern understanding of cognitive conditioning. Andrew Huberman describes how intention literally changes the brain's wiring through neuroplasticity. Every time you wake up and direct your focus with purpose, even in a single sentence like, "Today I act with calm," you strengthen new neural pathways. It's not affirmation in the superficial sense, it's neural architecture. You're training your mind to associate awareness with direction instead of anxiety. Over time, that repetition becomes identity. You stop chasing peace because you start thinking from peace. Cognitive behavioral therapy confirms the same principle. Thoughts influence emotions, which influence behavior. Your first thought becomes a seed, shaping not only how you feel, but how you act. When that seed is automatic, life feels repetitive. When it's intentional, life becomes creative. You don't control every emotion that arises later in the day, but you can control the one thought that frames them all. That's why the first minute of consciousness is so sacred. It's not small talk with yourself. It's psychological construction. Jordan Peterson reminds us that order begins in the smallest acts. Cleaning a room, making a bed, structuring thought. Reclaiming your first thought is the mental equivalent of cleaning your inner space before you inhabit it. It doesn't require meditation or ritual, only awareness. When you wake, instead of letting your mind wander into chaos, whisper a clear instruction to yourself. I decide what I see today. That statement signals control to your nervous system, setting a precedent for the rest of the day. This practice aligns your biology and philosophy into one force. The brain receives the message that awareness belongs to you, not to circumstance. Over time, the mind learns to wake calmly, naturally seeking focus before noise. The first thought becomes a compass, and direction becomes peace. You no longer wake reacting to life, you wake creating it. Step 3. Activating the mind-body circuit. The mind is not an isolated machine floating above the body. They are two sides of one living system, constantly informing each other. The moment you wake, the brain searches for signals from the body to determine your state. Are you safe, energized, threatened, or still asleep? If the body doesn't move, the brain interprets that as uncertainty. Stillness, when prolonged, reads like danger to your nervous system. That's why even on mornings when you've rested well, you can wake feeling foggy or anxious. The message from your body is incomplete. Andrew Huberman explains that movement is one of the most powerful regulators of emotional state. The eyes, muscles, and breath form a biological feedback loop that tells the brain where you are and whether it should prepare for action or calm. Light movement within the first few minutes of waking activates this circuit. Stretching, walking, or even the slow rhythm of your breath. This isn't exercise, it's a signal. It tells your nervous system, we're alive, we're safe, and we're ready to move. That signal stabilizes dopamine, balances cortisol, and shifts the mind out of rumination. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience. Marcus Aurelius wrote about aligning the body with purpose, starting each day with movement as an act of discipline and awareness. To move is to decide. Every small action at dawn, standing, walking, lifting your eyes toward the light, declares victory over inertia. Aristotle described this principle as potential made actual. Movement transforms thought into form. Without it, intention remains abstract, and the day remains theoretical. Modern psychology confirms that physical activation triggers motivation. The dopamine system is not stimulated by success, but by motion toward it. Each step, even small, tells your brain that progress is happening. That's why mornings where you begin with intentional movement feel different, lighter, clearer, more structured. You're giving the brain what it craves most, direction. Overthinking dissolves because your biology is busy creating momentum. René Descartes believed in separating the body from the mind to understand each clearly, but modern science now proves that unity creates mastery. The mind begins to calm when the body signals order. A walk in silence, sunlight on your eyes, controlled breathing. These are not habits. They are neurological commands. They re-establish communication between thought and physiology, ensuring that awareness and energy move together rather than in conflict. Jordan Peterson often emphasizes that posture itself changes psychology. The way you carry your body communicates hierarchy to your brain. Shoulders back, eyes forward, breath steady. These simple cues reshape your mental state before any words are spoken. You don't think your way into confidence. You move your way into it. When the body aligns, the mind follows. Activating the mind-body circuit is the point where intention becomes embodiment. You no longer rely on thought to generate control. You create it through motion. Each morning movement, no matter how small, declares to the brain that life is active, not reactive. This is how you reprogram the link between awareness and vitality. The mind gains structure, the body gains purpose, and the day begins with unity rather than fragmentation. Step 4. The dopamine alignment ritual. Every morning before you've done anything, your brain is already searching for reward. Dopamine, the chemical that drives pursuit and motivation, rises the moment you wake. It's what pulls you toward goals, meaning, and stimulation. But without direction, that same system turns against you. When the first hit of dopamine comes from checking notifications, scrolling, or reacting to noise, your brain learns to associate stimulation with stress. You start the day chasing quick rewards instead of meaningful ones. And before you've left your bed, your focus is already fragmented. Andrew Huberman explains that dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about pursuit. It fuels the anticipation of reward, not the reward itself. The brain is always asking, what's next? The problem is that the modern environment answers that question with endless, shallow stimuli. Every swipe, every click, every message trains your dopamine system to expect constant novelty. Over time, the brain forgets how to find satisfaction in stillness, work, or reflection. You begin to crave chaos because your neurochemistry has adapted to it. Reprogramming this pattern begins with aligning dopamine to purpose. Instead of feeding the system with noise, you feed it with direction. Joe Dispenza calls this reconditioning the body to a new mind. When you wake, and instead of reacting, you visualize one meaningful pursuit, something worth effort and patience. You redirect your dopamine system toward intention. The brain then starts to release energy in alignment with that vision. It's the difference between consuming energy and generating it. Aristotle taught that pleasure without virtue destroys discipline, while discipline guided by purpose creates joy. The same law governs neurochemistry. When you tie dopamine to external rewards, your peace depends on circumstances. But when you tie it to self-directed action, learning, creating, growing, you build what Huberman calls internal reward prediction. You begin to enjoy the process itself. Stress decreases because your satisfaction no longer depends on constant success. Jordan Peterson often says that meaning emerges from responsibility. The dopamine alignment ritual is responsibility applied to biology. You're teaching your brain that energy follows structure, not impulse. Each morning, when you consciously decide what deserves your attention, you filter out distractions before they infect your system. It's not just self-control, it's neurochemical training. You're reteaching the brain that calm pursuit produces deeper reward than anxious reaction. The ritual itself is simple. Before engaging with external input, take 1 minute to identify a meaningful aim. Speak it internally or write it down. Something small but purposeful. It can be clarity, gratitude, consistency, or focus. The act of naming your pursuit sets a chemical pathway. Your brain begins to anticipate fulfillment from that direction. Over time, it rewires your motivational circuits toward peace and patience rather than urgency. René Descartes believed that discipline in thought was the foundation of freedom. Here, discipline in intention becomes the foundation of emotional balance. You're no longer hostage to your dopamine. You're its architect. When you master where your reward comes from, you master your experience of the world. You start to feel content not because the world slows down, but because your chemistry does. That's how you begin to live with energy that doesn't burn out. Energy born not from reaction, but from purpose. Step 5. Silence as a neural reset. Silence is not emptiness, it's information. In a world that rewards noise, silence is the most radical form of control. Each morning, your brain wakes craving input, and most people give it chaos, sound, screens, conversations, distractions. But the nervous system, already flooded with cortisol and dopamine, needs coherence, not stimulation. Silence is how you recalibrate it. It's the moment when the prefrontal cortex, responsible for focus, planning, and decision, reclaims command from the emotional brain. Without silence, you don't start the day in control. You start reacting to the world before you've met yourself. Andrew Huberman's research shows that sensory rest, periods of reduced input, restores neural efficiency. When you allow even 2 minutes of stillness after waking, your brain shifts from high-frequency beta waves to a slower alpha rhythm. This state improves clarity, creativity, and regulation of stress hormones. Silence literally reorganizes the mind's electrical activity. It is not passive, it's active restoration. Just as muscles rebuild in rest, the mind recalibrates in quiet. The Stoics practiced this intuitively. Marcus Aurelius began each morning with reflection before speech. Seneca wrote that silence refines reason, that those who pause before speaking understand the world more deeply. To them, silence wasn't withdrawal. It was preparation. It was the sharpening of perception before engagement. The modern equivalent is removing distractions long enough for your internal systems to synchronize. This is how calm becomes strength, not passivity. Joe Dispenza explains that the body and mind are constantly trading information. When you're in silence, the absence of external input allows the body to signal safety to the brain. Breathing deepens, cortisol drops, and serotonin begins to rise. This biochemical shift sets the tone for the day. Not reactive, but receptive. You begin to hear the subtler rhythms of your own awareness. The thoughts that emerge in that space are different, slower, wiser, more deliberate. René Descartes believed in disciplined doubt as a path to clarity. Silence is that discipline embodied. It's the refusal to let noise define what you believe or feel. Each moment spent in quiet observation strengthens your ability to think independently, free from external interference. The longer you can remain in silence without discomfort, the stronger your internal order becomes. Over time, silence turns from an absence of sound to a presence of self. Jordan Peterson often speaks about the necessity of establishing internal order before confronting external chaos. Silence is where that order is built. It's not an escape from responsibility, but the construction of readiness. Without it, your mind becomes a sponge for the world's anxiety. With it, you become an anchor within the storm. When you start the day with silence, you create the psychological conditions for control, composure, and clarity. Practically, silence as a neural reset requires nothing but intention. Sit, breathe, listen. Resist the urge to fill the air. The mind will race at first, searching for stimulation. That's withdrawal. Stay. You're teaching your brain that peace can exist without distraction. Over days and weeks, this act rewires your system. You start noticing calm where there used to be pressure. You begin responding instead of reacting. And one morning, without realizing it, you wake not into chaos, but into clarity. Step 6. Gratitude as a neurological override. Gratitude is often spoken of as an emotion of the heart, but science reveals it as a recalibration of the brain. When practiced intentionally, gratitude does not simply make you feel good. It rewires your nervous system to stop scanning for threats. Most people begin their mornings rehearsing problems, deadlines, obligations, regrets, which triggers the amygdala, the brain's threat detector. Gratitude interrupts that sequence. It shifts your perception from defense to awareness, creating what neuroscience calls a positive prediction error. You're teaching your mind to expect calm rather than crisis. Andrew Huberman explains that authentic gratitude increases serotonin and activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that governs emotional regulation and decision-making. When this system is active, stress hormones decline, heart rate steadies, and focus improves. It's a biological override. Gratitude turns off the alarm system of the brain. You're not ignoring problems. You're changing the internal chemistry from which you face them. It's the difference between reaction and reflection. Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence aligns with this principle. He teaches that awareness of emotion without regulation leads to reactivity, but pairing awareness with appreciation creates stability. Gratitude grounds attention in the present moment, the one place where anxiety cannot survive. By naming even one simple truth that's good, a breath, sunlight, a quiet room, you redirect your mental spotlight from scarcity to sufficiency. The mind follows what it focuses on. Gratitude becomes your internal compass, pointing toward peace. The Stoics practiced gratitude as a discipline, not a sentiment. Seneca wrote that nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart, but he meant it as a form of mental training. To be grateful in the morning was to declare independence from circumstance. It was to say, "My peace is internal, not borrowed." Modern neuroscience confirms that this mindset rewires your baseline emotions. Over time, gratitude strengthens neural pathways that favor optimism and resilience, reducing the mental noise that fuels overthinking and stress. Joe Dispenza describes gratitude as the emotional signature of receiving. When you feel grateful for something not yet tangible, your brain releases the same neurochemicals it would if the event had already occurred. This phenomenon, known as emotional rehearsal, programs the brain to perceive safety and fulfillment even before the external world changes. It's how you condition your nervous system to remain calm in uncertainty. You're not faking happiness. You're training your biology to operate from trust rather than fear. René Descartes sought truth through logic, but gratitude reveals truth through perception. When you choose appreciation over complaint, you reveal the bias of your own consciousness. That meaning depends not on events, but on interpretation. Gratitude doesn't deny pain. It places it in proportion. It reminds you that even in imperfection, life contains structure, rhythm, and beauty worth noticing. Jordan Peterson often says that meaning is the antidote to suffering. Gratitude creates meaning instantly. It gives shape to chaos by identifying what remains good and stable within it. Each morning that you consciously practice gratitude, you're building a brain that looks for order rather than threat. The result is not just calm, it's competence. You begin to meet stress with composure instead of collapse. Gratitude as a neurological override is not about positive thinking, it's about accurate thinking. It's the discipline of seeing the whole truth, not just what's wrong, but also what's right. Over time, that perspective becomes instinct. Your brain stops scanning for danger by default, and your mornings begin to unfold not with tension, but with trust. You stop starting your day defending yourself from life, and start living it. Step 7. The intentional input filter. Your mind is a gate, but most people wake up and leave it wide open. Before your thoughts even stabilize, the outside world floods in. Notifications, headlines, noise, comparison. Each piece of input becomes an instruction to your brain. This is what matters. This is what you should feel. The problem isn't the information itself. It's the order in which you receive it. Neuroscience shows that the first external stimuli you expose yourself to after waking determine the emotional pattern your brain will repeat all day. If chaos enters first, chaos sets the tone. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain's attentional networks are highly plastic in the first hour after waking. They are essentially asking, "What should I care about today?" Every sound, image, and word you allow in answers that question. The mistake most people make is letting algorithms decide before intention has a chance to speak. Social media is engineered to exploit your dopamine system, hijacking your natural curiosity and replacing it with reaction. You begin the day not with direction, but distraction, training your brain to chase novelty instead of meaning. The solution is an intentional input filter, a deliberate boundary between waking consciousness and external noise. This filter doesn't mean isolation, it means curation. Decide consciously what earns the right to enter your awareness first. It could be natural sound, light, a book, or a journal, something that nourishes attention rather than fractures it. Joe Dispenza calls this creating coherent energy, choosing input that aligns with the emotional state you want to sustain. You're no longer a passive receiver of information, you're an architect of influence. Daniel Goleman's research on focus shows that attention is a muscle, strengthened or weakened by what we feed it. Every time you engage with reactive content early in the day, you drain cognitive energy before it's even needed. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision and planning, fatigues quickly under digital stimulation. By midday, you feel scattered and unmotivated, not because you've done too much, but because your mental energy was wasted on noise. The intentional input filter protects that resource. Philosophically, this is discipline of the highest order. Aristotle taught that virtue is found in moderation, neither deprivation nor indulgence, but choice guided by purpose. The same applies to modern attention. You don't need to avoid the world, you need to govern how it enters you. The Stoics understood this instinctively. Control begins where reactivity ends. When you select what you see and hear with awareness, you train your brain to remain sovereign in a distracted age. René Descartes argued that doubt should serve as a method for truth. Question everything until only what's essential remains. The intentional input filter is that principle applied to modern consciousness. It's not skepticism toward the world, it's skepticism toward unfiltered stimulation. You begin the day asking, "Does this serve my clarity or scatter it?" That question becomes your armor against the flood. Jordan Peterson reminds us that order must be built daily, not once. The mind, left unattended, defaults to chaos. The intentional input filter is how you rebuild that order every morning. It tells your brain that your peace is earned through design, not chance. Each choice, what you listen to, read, or look at, becomes an act of psychological architecture. You're programming your nervous system before the world gets the chance to program it for you. Over time, this practice transforms mornings into sacred ground. You no longer wake reacting to information, you wake choosing influence. The world still speaks, but it no longer dictates. What enters your mind now has a gatekeeper, awareness. And in that gatekeeping lies freedom, the kind that no amount of scrolling will ever provide. Step 8. breathing into awareness. The most powerful way to control the mind is through the body, and the most direct way to control the body is through breath. Every emotional state, fear, calm, focus, hesitation, has a corresponding breathing pattern. When you wake up and breathe shallowly or erratically, your body assumes danger is near. The mind, reading that signal, begins to search for reasons to justify the tension. This is how anxiety begins, not with thought, but with physiology. Awareness begins when you interrupt that loop. Andrew Huberman explains that the breath is a remote control for the nervous system. A long exhale activates the parasympathetic branch, signaling safety. The physiological sigh, a deep inhale followed by a short top-up and a slow release, is one of the fastest biological ways to lower stress hormones and reset focus. When you practice controlled breathing within the first minutes of your day, you're teaching your brain that alertness and calm can coexist. You're establishing a rhythm that blends clarity with composure. Most people underestimate how deeply breathing patterns shape perception. When the breath is shallow, the visual field narrows, attention becomes reactive, and the brain locks into survival mode. When breathing slows and deepens, awareness expands, and the prefrontal cortex, the center of decision and reasoning, re-engages. In that shift, thinking becomes structured, emotion stabilizes, and clarity emerges. The breath is not just oxygen exchange. It's the translation of awareness into biology. Joe Dispenza teaches that the body often becomes addicted to emotional states. Breathing deliberately interrupts that addiction. It sends a new signal to the brain. We are no longer at war with life. Over time, this repetition rewires your neural pathways to associate stillness with safety. You begin to crave presence more than distraction. You stop needing chaos to feel alive. The morning breath ritual becomes your anchor, a physical act that returns consciousness to the present moment. René Descartes sought truth through reason, but reason collapses without control of state. The philosopher's clarity depended on internal equilibrium. Breathing is that equilibrium in motion. It bridges intellect and instinct, the rational mind and the emotional body. To breathe consciously is to restore unity between these two halves of being. Aristotle would have called it practical wisdom in action, mastery of one's inner conditions before facing the external world. Jordan Peterson often says that chaos must be confronted with order, not avoidance. Controlled breathing is order applied to the nervous system. It's the quiet rebellion against reactivity. You're no longer a victim of your body's responses. You're its conductor. Every slow, deliberate inhale is an assertion of leadership over your own biology. Every exhale is a release of what doesn't belong: anxiety, clutter, noise. The Stoics believed that control begins not in the mind, but in the breath. Epictetus taught that when you control your breath, you master impulse. Modern science has proven him right. Conscious breathing stabilizes heart rate variability, enhances focus, and increases dopamine availability, the exact neurochemical foundation for calm motivation. The act is ancient, but its impact is measurable. Each morning when you breathe into awareness, you're programming your body to match your intention. You're no longer thinking about control, you're embodying it. Breath by breath, you teach your system to begin each day with balance instead of panic, with presence instead of rush. And that's how mornings stop being a reaction to life. They become a rhythm aligned with it. Step 9. Future visualization, with present anchoring. Your mind doesn't distinguish strongly between imagination and reality. Neuroscience shows that when you visualize an event vividly, the same neural circuits that would activate if you were living it in real time begin to fire. This is why the images you create in the morning matter so much. Your brain treats them as instructions. The problem is that most people visualize unconsciously. They imagine conflict, deadlines, and what could go wrong. Their nervous system prepares for battle before the day even begins. Future visualization with present anchoring reverses that pattern. It uses imagination to create order, not anxiety. Joe Dispenza describes this as emotional rehearsal, the process of mentally rehearsing the life you want to experience, while embodying the emotion as if it were already real. When you do this from a calm state, the brain begins to wire new associations. The body learns that success, peace, or focus are familiar, not foreign. But if you visualize from stress, you reinforce scarcity. The key isn't just to picture the future, it's to anchor it in the physiology of the present moment. Calm first, then vision. Andrew Huberman confirms that intention paired with emotion strengthens neuroplasticity. When you feel gratitude, excitement, or purpose as you imagine your future, your brain releases dopamine and norepinephrine, chemicals that tag that vision as important. This increases the likelihood that your subconscious will guide your behavior toward it throughout the day. You're not forcing motivation, you're programming direction. The clarity that follows isn't mystical, it's neurological precision born from alignment between mind and body. Philosophically, this practice echoes Aristotle's concept of teleology. Everything in nature moves toward a purpose. When you visualize, you're defining that purpose for yourself. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum when applied to challenge, preparing the mind to meet difficulty with reason and calm. Future visualization with present anchoring is its modern complement, envisioning success with the same discipline, knowing that outcomes belong to effort, not emotion. You see where you're going, and you move there without tension. Jordan Peterson often says that people don't rise to the level of their goals, they fall to the level of their habits. Visualization becomes powerful only when fused with presence. The image of the future is meant to direct the habits of now. By anchoring in breath, posture, and calm awareness, you ensure that imagination doesn't become escapism. You train your brain to link the feeling of progress to stillness, not rush. This is what creates consistency, movement born from peace rather than panic. René Descartes believed that the act of thought could shape reality through clarity. Visualization is that principle made biological. You think with precision, and your brain responds by building pathways to make those thoughts real. But clarity requires discipline. Imagine only what aligns with your highest order, not what indulges distraction. Thought, when structured, becomes architecture. When scattered, it becomes noise. Joe Dispenza's research shows that people who practice calm, emotion-filled visualization experience measurable changes in gene expression linked to focus and resilience. This means your thoughts can literally prepare your biology for the future you want. Each morning, when you picture yourself acting with composure, your nervous system rehearses that stability. You don't hope to be calm later. You practice being calm now. Future visualization with present anchoring is not fantasy. It's functional design. It bridges the abstract and the real, the future and the now. You imagine not to escape life, but to meet it more intelligently. The world doesn't reward those who dream chaotically. It rewards those who dream with structure. When your imagination and presence cooperate, your life begins to align, not through force, but through focus. Step 10. The mirror principle, acting into peace. Everything you've practiced until now builds toward a single truth. Peace isn't something you find, it's something you practice. The mirror principle means that your outer world always reflects your inner state. The way you act in the first moments of your day doesn't just influence your mood, it programs your perception. You think you're observing the world, but you're really observing your own nervous system projected onto it. When you start your day in alignment, calm, deliberate, and focused, life begins to mirror that clarity back to you. Jordan Peterson often says that order and chaos are two sides of existence, and that meaning is found in balancing them. The morning is where that balance is negotiated. If you start with reactivity, the day multiplies your noise. If you start with awareness, the day expands your structure. This is the foundation of all psychological transformation. Your behavior teaches your brain what to believe. When you act from peace before you feel it, you teach your biology that peace is safe. Over time, the body learns that calm is the new normal. Andrew Huberman explains that action itself shapes emotional regulation. When you take deliberate, structured steps at the start of the day, even small ones, your prefrontal cortex strengthens its influence over the limbic system, the part of the brain that controls emotion. This connection rewires stress responses into stability. Your body stops reacting like life is happening to you and begins responding like it's happening through you. Acting into peace is the rewiring of identity from survival to creation. The Stoics lived by this principle long before neuroscience could explain it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Action is how those thoughts take form. Each morning that you act with calm intention, walking slowly, breathing deeply, speaking deliberately, you're dyeing your nervous system with serenity. You are becoming the person your thoughts once promised to be. This is not passive acceptance, it's active mastery. Joe Dispenza describes this shift as coherence, the alignment between heart, mind, and body. When your actions reflect your desired state rather than your reactive state, the body synchronizes with the mind. Your physiology begins to produce the chemistry of peace automatically. Dopamine supports focus, serotonin stabilizes mood, and cortisol stays within balance. You're no longer chasing peace. You're generating it. The mirror of life begins reflecting that internal order back in every interaction, task, and decision. René Descartes pursued clarity through method, believing structure leads to understanding. Acting into peace is that method brought to life. It's the disciplined application of awareness, replacing thought with embodiment. Aristotle taught that virtue is habit formed through action. Peace, then, is not a feeling to wait for, but a virtue to practice until it becomes instinct. When your mornings start with that discipline, serenity stops being a visitor and becomes a state of residence. The mirror principle is the closing loop in this system of reprogramming. Every thought, every breath, every choice from the moment you wake teaches the brain who you are. The world responds accordingly. You don't need to control the day. You need to align with it. The mind that wakes with intention no longer chases peace through control. It experiences peace through coherence. Acting into peace is your final step because it turns every morning habit into identity. You've trained your biology to serve awareness, your thoughts to serve structure, your actions to serve calm. And in that alignment, stress loses authority. Life still moves, problems still exist, but they no longer define your rhythm. You've reclaimed it. And that's how each day begins, not as a reaction, but as a reflection of the order you've created within yourself.